Warm welcome to all of you. Welcome to this very special webinar where I'll have a pleasure to have a conversation with Chef Ramzi Saade from Atica, and we're going to discuss how to elevate dining with AI, immersion, and digital storytelling. Before we start, we have a couple of rules about etiquette and how to ask questions. So in case you ask, the audience is muted. Prefer video off and the chat is closed, but you have the Q&A tab to suggest questions for both of us. We will dedicate 15 minutes at the end of this webinar to make sure that most of your questions, if not all, are addressed. You can also vote the questions up, so you help us find which are the one who are most relevant for you. The webinar will be recorded, so in case you want to replay a part of it, you have this option. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us through an email. Without having said, having said that, very pleased to be with Chef Ramzi today joining me. Couple of reasons for why this webinar, what we're going to talk about in this webinar, and why gastronomy and why digital. So first reason is that technology and luxury are often pinged against one another. Okay, and so today we talk about how to integrate technology to elevate the brand experience, and we are very honored and happy to have Chef Ramzi with us today, and how he has done that at Atica. The second topic that we're going to, which is going to act as a red thread, is really the idea that brand building in this digital age is increasingly sensorial and actually even more multisensorial. And if you think about the latest success across sectors, they've all built in on how to juxtapose, how to merge, how to blend the different senses. And we are again joined by an expert today. How do we do that? How to boost immersion? What is the recipe? And then finally, as you'll soon realize, there are kind of two aspects of Atica, this very special restaurant, and we're going to talk about how to create successful business model, not only for B2B but also for B2C in the luxury and the high-end space. How to do both and create unique value proposition and diversify to power growth. So I'm pleased to be joined with Chef Ramzi Saade. So Ramzi, you can turn on your video right now. Before we get our conversation and I start, welcome Ramzi, warm
Hi
welcome
David,
to you.
how are you?
Before we get started, we have Atica is a restaurant, but you would definitely convene that it's much more than a restaurant. Actually, you have a chance to tell us what it is, but we thought that the best way actually to give you a chance to experience what it is to play a short video. And so the video will start in a few minutes, and you'll get a chance after, yeah. So just a short video where you see immediately, aside from the advertising for Burger King, but you saw, how this place is much more than a restaurant. Maybe Ramzi, first question is, first of all, how would you define Atica, and how is it like unique to you? So how did your background shape your approach to culinary innovation, and led you to this unique project?
David, thanks for having me today. We're working together on a few initiatives. So, I'm an engineer and a chef, Lebanese, Canadian. And I think I have two aspects to my background. One aspect is I'm multicultural. I lived in many countries in the world, and I love traveling, and it's part of why I did INSEAD. And the second piece is engineering and cuisine. And so to me, Atica was an answer to a very simple question, which is how do we get people more curious one for another? How do we how do you create moments that are more memorable? And I used both sides of my background, cuisine, which is the most important doorway to culture, which is the reason why people get together every day. And then the other thing is engineering. How can I put technology at the service of the human being to take the first job ever invented on the planet, the first prehistoric job, which is cooking, first thing that humans did on the planet. They cooked, and then the second thing is they gave food for other people. And then how do we take technology and apply it to that to bring it forward to the next century? So I think it was a direct answer to my engineering background and my capacity to understand different systems and to put them in action together.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so when you think about this, one of the things that amazed me when kind of first met you and actually got interested in your venture is really that when you think about cooking, at least, or cuisine or gastronomy, technology is not the first thing that comes as a kind of a natural complement to it. So I know you mentioned you have this engineer background, but can you tell us a little bit about your view of technology? Like what is it for you? And how did you first recognize or kind of the idea of bringing technology into this culinary creativity? Is it a tool? Is it more than a tool? Is it an enabler? What can you tell us about this?
I'm going to play on two pieces of your question, the why and the how of technology applied to our work at Atica. The why is today the new challenge that we're having. So as you know, this generation moved from the baby boomers from buying products to buying experiences. People cherish experiences. That's what they like to spend their money and spend their time. The new problem we have is that in 2 minutes today, we see on TikTok more than our grandparents saw their entire lives. And so the new problem we're having is memorability. You get so exposed to different, let's call them information, data through one of the five senses, which is how do you remember? How do you remember a few weeks later? How do you remember a year later? And then we play on a different word, which is definition of luxury. Luxury, when you have no money, it's having money. When you have money, it's having time. And when you have a lot of time, it's having meaning. And then when you have meaning, the problem is remembering it. And so to me, luxury equals memorability, and memorability is the new challenge of our generation. That's what people are seeking. It's memorable experiences. If we work on cuisine the traditional way, if you're going to do like everybody else does, which is just cook a nice meal, have a nice decor, some white tablecloth, it's not going to be memorable enough because people have seen that so much. So I said, well, we need to find a technological way to make this more memorable. So that was why I used technology. And then the how is I realized early on in my career as a chef, looking at books like Gastrophysics from Charles Spence, a multisensorial professor in Oxford, and the work of Heston Blumenthal, a chef in the Fat Duck that started about 20 years ago working on immersive experiences, and then Paul Perrin, Ultraviolet Shanghai, the worst, kind of fanciest restaurant that closed a few weeks ago, which is how to use the technology. Well, what we learned is when your brain perceives multiple messages from different neurons coming from different senses, you get like a form of sublimation where you get so bombarded that you're in the moment and you remember it. And so what we learned is you shouldn't speak to one sense, you should speak to multiple at the same time. So that's why I went through multisensory. And then from there, you start studying everything available in the planet today, be it projection, be it food, be it music, so on and so forth. And then that's where you start going in that direction.
And that's how you expand your universe like very, very clearly. So thank you so much, Ramzi, for that. So maybe one last question about your background, before I really quickly want to get into the technology aspect. But if you think about, I'm sure we have many entrepreneurs, potentially future entrepreneurs in the audience. If you were to kind of summarize kind of the key moments that led to Atica as it is today, what would you say were the key defining moments that shaped Atica and perhaps that announced the focus on technology?
So I got Atica's idea when I was at INSEAD. I was at 20J, and in P2 I got Atica's idea, and then I left INSEAD for a period to go do an internship at the most immersive restaurant in the world called Alchemist Copenhagen at the time. And it's a 2 Michelin star restaurant in Copenhagen, still doing immersive experiences today around topics of sustainability and activism and other things. And so to me, that was a very important moment, which is seeing what is available today. The other moment is if you zoom out and you look at what luxury brands are doing, more and more after COVID, they're not investing anymore in digital, pure digital experiences. They're investing in experiences that mix digital and analog. Today, when they do fashion weeks, when they do events, launches, brand, today they want to make humans live physical in digitally enabled physical moments that tend to stick more. And so when I saw, for example, new watch launches after COVID, people yearned the most to be back together. And so all the brands were working in that direction. I thought, well, they're probably all smarter than me. And if they're going in that direction, it's probably where we should be going. And then that's all fun. But what I started doing is prototyping. So at INSEAD, my first prototype was an Airbnb, then Chateau de Fleury near Fonty, and then 5 years of working on the project, doing different pop-ups in Paris, 3 different pop-ups. And that's where I started seeing when you ask people 6 months later, what do you remember? Why doing this? And if we, just because they saw an image, um, something like a lavender field, if you look at a lavender field, you smell it and you feel good. Something that a few professors, for example, do you know why boards are green at school? It's because it's the green effect. You feel better. You feel as if you're in nature when you see green, and your psychology goes down. And when you start studying psychological phenomena like that, you understand that the more you play on these things, the more memorable people's moments are. So me, it was just test and learn. I iterated.
Very good. So, and this is definitely a key lesson for all of us. Is you start small, and then you see how you can scale things up. So let's move a little bit into the technology aspect. So when you talk
Yeah.
about technology, let's be maybe a bit concrete. We see, you did mention actually that a lot of the brands stopped or retargeted their digital investment. So can you be a little bit more concrete about what type of technology is at the heart of Atica, or
Yeah.
should I say maybe technologies? And we have seen a little bit already in the video, but perhaps also talking about the technology which is used in the back end. How can you
Yeah.
think about this portfolio of technologies to support and power these experiences?
And so at Atica, we work on the 5 different senses to create memorable moments for B2C and B2B customers. The topic is different, but the approach is exactly the same. So when you first arrive for your experience, you start by an analog floor where we're immersing you with analog approaches, be it art, sculptures, drinks, music. And then you pass through a perfume expo. And that's where it starts simulating a sense that you stimulate the least with the shortest neuron between your nose and your brain. And so people go through a perfume expo depending on the topic of the experience they're living through. And then they go downstairs. Atica is right across Notre Dame. That's the first Atica that we built in Paris. It's an old cinema. The dining room is a 6 meter high, 100 square meter immersive space. And there you have the smallest pixels on the planet today. So it's a white wall made out of drywall where we project. So it's the best projection technology today, which is mono DLP, 16K image. We have the smallest pixels on the planet. They're 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, and there's 73 million around you when you dine. And so first thing is we produce our own images and we shoot them on the screen. So as soon as you enter the space, you're downstairs in the basement. There's no natural light, there's no clock, and you have no reception. For a human being that is constantly on their phone all day, just losing that internet connection alone immerses you. And these are the small tricks we start playing on. And then you go downstairs, and then there's an image, and then starts the food, and then the drinks, and then the music, and the sounds, and different textures that we play, for example, on the tableware of how will it make sounds as soon as the spoon touches the plate to come and augment the screen. That's all on the front end. That's what the customer sees.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the back end, to make all that happen, we work on synchronized experiences, which are today very rare in the culinary world. They are more common in the events world. When in a concert, for example, everybody listens to the same music at the same time. Usually, when people think about gastronomy, outside of being invited to somebody's home or being invited to an event in a regular B2C setting, you're used to having different people in the room having different experiences at different times. Some people are having dessert, some people are having salads. At Atica, the first fundamental difference is we're all living a collective experience. That's what makes it happen. That's what makes it possible. It's synchronized. We're all having the same food at the same time with the same um, audiovisual experience, and then the smell as well. And that's what makes it possible. So the first piece is you need to synchronize. So we created something called the show plan. We call our experiences shows. And then in the show plan, you have a plan of how the event will happen. And then every minute, what are we looking at? What are we eating? What are we smelling? What are we drinking? What are we touching? And you work on that. And that's 5 years of work, about 5,600 customers served to get to this level of detail on at what speed the human beings eat, at what the time does everybody go to the washroom, because we're like an opera and we need to think about things like that. And then to make that happen, the back end is the most important thing. So you start working on this restaurant and you think it's just a restaurant. And then you get to a point where you push the audiovisual technology, you get all that, and then you get into humans. The problem with humans is they're hard to control. So we're still a restaurant at the heart. The kitchen still drops the sauce on the floor. Clients don't behave. Clients go and smoke cigarettes. They fall on the floor. They break wine glasses. It's a living experience. And so in the back end, we created the capacity through different computers in the kitchen to one, see what's happening in the dining room, which is not quite uncommon. There's few restaurants today on the planet that have cameras and they look in the back to see how is the tempo of service going, what issues are happening. And then the second thing is you have a show plan, so you have a perfect plan of how things should go according to all the data you've had from previous customers. And then you have live camera feed of what's happening. Third missing ingredient is a computer that controls all that and that can enable us to buy time. So if we say, be it in a B2C show or a B2B show, that 9:04 we're thinking of getting the fish out. Well, 9:04, if somebody drops a plate, or 9:03, you need the ability to buy time. And so the computer dynamically recodes the audiovisual content to create more content and to lengthen it. This way, every time that the sheep herder finishes herding her sheep, your cheesecake is coming out. And that's super important to have a completely synchronous experience all the time, for you to have a consistent experience. So then to me, that's the biggest piece of technology that we use every day in service, which is this ability to recode audiovisual to adapt to the kitchen or to the dining room.
Very good, and that's, I mean, remarkable, right? So what I hear is, it's really your drive to integrate different technologies and blend them around. So we're with tools from AI to data analytics to visualization tools as well. And the idea is, how do you blend that both for shaping the customer experience, but also for optimizing the delivery? One thing we haven't, I will connect to the next question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so David, I focused my answer on the execution of the show the day of.
Yeah.
On the creation, if you want, I'll give you two more things that we do. So on the creation, we have two things that we're using actively. One thing is a visualization tool. So when we have events coming in and customers want specific events, brands for a fashion show or launching a product or so on and so forth, they don't have we have an asymmetry of information. We know how Atica works. We know how these experiences work. They don't. And they're committing large sums of money on their most important days. For example, tonight we're celebrating 100 years of Danone, the food company at Atica. And so for that event, they couldn't see everything ahead. So the one way to explain that to them is using 3D visualization tools to tell them, okay, this is what the audiovisual experience will look like, but also this is what the food that will come with it and so on. So they need more visualization to make that clear. And then the second thing we use is AI generated content. And of course, we started with images because they're the easiest. For example, we had a launch of a certain product. They had two human beings shot already, and they wanted a third human being that wasn't available. And they wanted a third person to complement the spectrum of what's shown. And so we created an image with AI of a third person that looks like the other two, but slightly different, like the brand wanted, to make that possible on the screen. So we started with that. And then we played on sound. generating sounds is something very interesting. Today, it's completely cost prohibitive to go create sounds for something like if you want the sound of a wave that is in synchronous, if you want the sound of a wave that is synchronous to the video of the wave and that crashes at the same time. If you pay somebody today, an animator, to create that manually, it takes hours and hours and completely cost prohibitive and not value creating. So then we started with sound. And now where we got to is mixology and um,
Mhm.
and um, and food. And that's more interesting because what brands tend to tell you is, for example, we did an event for a car collectors club, a vintage car collectors club. And they said, well, we have nothing in common. We all love different brands. We'd like to create, we want a bespoke experience around our brand DNA. So we created a cocktail that smells like petroleum
Mhm.
because it's the one thing that they all have in common. Vintage car lovers love the smell of petroleum and they smell it all day. And when you play on things like that, that AI can help you with. So you use very easy tools like OpenAI, but nobody used it for food yet. So we push it, we push it, we push it with the good prompts, with the right questions, with the right level of information about the brand. And it can help you create things. We're still not at a point where it's a finished product. It's a good starting point. So we have different creative meetings with our clients. And so you take the brief, and AI can help you because it's a machine. It will get ideas that you never thought about. Because in your mind, petroleum is something you put in the car. It's not
Yeah.
something you drink. And so you wouldn't have thought about it. And to me, that's where it's playing a role. Food is 90% of the stuff we get out of AI is not exploitable in its state. It
Yeah.
still needs our artistic touch, our
Mhm.
human touch to come and make, okay, I see where ChatGPT was trying to go. They were trying to go in the direction of petroleum in cars. Now they don't know how to make that taste good. That's our job. But I like the idea and I would have never thought about it. And that's where we're playing with AI. Same thing on food. How, for example, right before this meeting, I played with ChatGPT and I asked him, "Can you create an INSEAD cocktail for me?"
Mhm.
And so, and it could go scrape all the available information. If one
Yeah.
time one dean said something in a conference, it will integrate it into, for example, ChatGPT had the reflex to make the cocktail non-alcoholic. I'm like, I asked you for a cocktail, not a mocktail. But in their mind, it's because INSEAD is all about inclusivity. And so what if somebody doesn't want to drink alcohol?
Mm.
It's a wow. You wouldn't have thought about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So great example, and that was perfect answer to you use an array of digital tools for not only improving the delivery, but also increasingly the creation of unique experiences, right? And so great to see how you're using that for innovation. So you already alluded to it, but just for the audience, there's a B2C side to Atica, so you can go anytime. I highly recommend the experience.
Like a
But there's
regular
also
restaurant.
great restaurant. We would agree on that. But there's also a B2B side. And so you started alluding to the fact that you've got these events and you work with brands. And so the question I want to ask yourself is in regards to the technology, this unique value proposition that you have, is that specifically appealing for B2B? I mean, why do you think that Atica is particularly well positioned for these B2B audiences, this blend of cuisine and gastronomy and technology?
To make sure everybody with us understands the difference in the value proposition on the BDC side, we create immersive experiences around cultures of people.
Mhm.
So the first season when we launched in September was about the Basque Country, and then last week we premiered the second season about Corsica. And so we'll keep producing our own shows around cultures of the world. And a lot of people think that is a blue ocean because nobody has done that yet. And that's great. But then our B2B's work is taking a brand DNA and trying to create a bespoke experience around that DNA to create a memorable moment for that brand. So we're talking about audiovisual, smell, food, drinks, wines, so on and so forth around and art and objects and through the five senses, a moment around the DNA of that brand geared towards a specific message that they're trying to communicate to you.
Mhm.
And if you think the B2C is a blue ocean, the B2B is a white ocean because today brands, that's their challenge, specifically in luxury when you're selling people something they don't need in their lives. You don't need a very fancy watch or a very fancy uh, bag or to be member of some beautiful club. You don't need this. Your life can go on without it. It's a luxury. That's why it's called luxury, because it's not needed. And so when you're trying to do that, the one thing you want to make sure is, can you immerse somebody in today a value? If you look at the cost structure of a luxury product, I don't know, David. I mean, you've written so many cases about luxury. I don't know how much percent of the cost structure is literally brand equity. If percent of revenue is only for brand equity, it's not related to the cost of the bag. It's you paying the premium of a brand. Well, the thing with the brand equity, it's a brand universe. But today you need to embody and to concretize
Translate.
this brand universe. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm launching a nice luxury brand, and this is our universe." Well, it's like, but make me live your universe. I want to understand how you see the world, and so we're helping brands make that more concrete.
Hmm.
If today I pitch you something like, here's our new luxury brand, and what we do is we create these amazing voyages throughout the world, travel experiences that you've never seen. We'll take you to places you've never seen, completely inaccessible. Uh, it's like, can you just give me a taste of that? And so, if you want, if a brand is a movie, Atica is someone who will come create a trailer for that movie to get
Hmm.
you excited to buy that ticket and go see the movie. We help them condense their brand
Hmm.
universe in a 2 hour experience that's extremely intense and short and memorable, where it takes every single aspect of the brand. And so they're interested in us because they're competing on your attention,
Hmm.
be it a B2C or B2B client. We have B2B brands that do events. So, for example, we're hosting a like an investor speed dating event where a bunch of family offices and a bunch of
Yeah.
um, funds are speed dating the entire day, and they're trying to see who wants to work with who. And so, even in a situation like that, it's like in a classic setting, you would have just rented a white space.
Yeah.
But it's how can we enable this moment to create more value?
Yeah.
We're doing a fundraise for the United Nations, and these are things also that are uh, traditionally done in a different setting. But it's, can we use this setting to augment the result attended or expected from that event, which is raising money? So in B2B, we're seen as a creation partner for
Yeah.
people. For example, we're launching a perfume in 2 weeks. We're launching, and those are things that if you want to be seen as innovative to your customers as a brand, you need to do things in an innovative way. You can't just rent the auditorium that's behind you on the screen and create a moment there. It's just people have seen that, so it's déjà vu. That's the challenge.
Absolutely. No, no, and I think what is really unique here is that, instead of using technology just for optimization and delivery, which would be already great, like you also use these technologies for storytelling. So maybe before we get into perhaps like the learnings that you've had and the balance between human and technology, which is super important in hospitality, I want to ask you like one last question around like this sensorial element, right? So
Yeah.
how do you translate what you're saying is, brands increasingly, they need to become multimodal. They need to translate the DNA in different modalities across the senses. And so the question that I want to ask you is what's the secret, right? So if a brand wants to go across the senses, are there known recipes? Like how do you juxtapose? We already seen a couple of examples of how you're using technology to augment the senses, but are there any framework or any best ways of working that you apply to essentially help brands to become more multi-sensory?
I mean, you laugh if I put this forward, but um, a lot of people that are with us on the call are INSEAD graduates, and a lot of them have passed through consulting at some point in their life. You need to see us with the events business as a consultant. We're outside of the brand, so even if they are bathing in their brand universe the entire day, because we come in one day cold, we have a specific distance that is actually to our advantage, which is like, oh, David, you keep telling me about this INSEAD brand. listening to you for the past 10 minutes, I still don't understand what makes you different from other MBA schools. Having that distance is the first ingredient.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to be external to the brand. The brands can do it themselves because they're bathing in their universe the whole day and they don't know that the customer's outside. And then the second, so on the framework question, we use two things. The creative process is quite simple. We have a brief. We force the brand to first distill down one paragraph of what they want from that day, and then to distill it down to one sentence, and then from one sentence to one word. So if we were to give one word of what emotion do you want the people, so we work backwards, right? We ask the brand, what emotion do you want the people to remember 1 year from now?
Mm-hmm.
So an attendee of this event 1 year, if I ask them one question, what do they say? And if they can give me one word, well, we help them, we brainstorm with them, we convert, we diverge, and then we converge. It's the regular creative process of every single person who's ever designed anything with us on the call. Force that one word. And then from that word, we go and we say, okay, what have you done so far in terms of experiences for your customers? What has your brand expression been so far? Show us things that you've done, show us activations, show us your website
Yeah.
and different things. And we understand your current, let's call it brand vitrine or of
Mm-hmm.
how you present yourself. And then we say, okay, what can we add? And then typically we do have secret sauces and we do have secret recipes that are not so secret. But there's few things we know, which is tricks that work on people when different neurons send to the brain conflicting signals. For example, a fun fact for a few people, why do you get motion sick or seasick in the sea? It's because if you look far away to the coast, your eyes are saying you're fixed because the boat is not moving, but your feet is saying that the boat is moving. So your brain thinks that you're poisoned, and then that's why you vomit to get the poison out of your system. So every time we have mixed signals, the brain is lost. Give you another fun example closer to us. Why do you put jazz music in coffee shops? Not at all because people love jazz. It's because jazz music is low tempo and it gets bitterness out more beautifully. So the coffee tastes better. You can try this at home, have a good, same cup of coffee with jazz music and then with high tempo music or some electro music or something like that. And you'll feel how the coffee tastes different. The same amount of food on a white or black plate, you will stop eating sooner on a black plate. So if you have a young kid who's struggling losing weight, put some black dishes and see what happens. Why? Because the eyes are not used to seeing food on black, so everything appears bigger. And so after we do the first creative meeting with the brand, we go away, we note everything that we learned from their brand universe, things they've done and things they wish to do. And then we apply some of these tricks that we've learned through the years to create something. And then we
Mm-hmm.
create a first draft of an audiovisual proposal because we produce the content also for the events, and then a first menu and a wine pairing. I'll give you something super small. And it's just, David, because it's not that we're smarter than other people. It's just nobody ever took the time to think of these things. For example, we did a cosmetic company that only works on women products. So it's a woman empowered, women centric, women client brand. We did the menu, they validated it. We did the film, they validated it. The day of the event, they had bought a wine pairing from us. And the
Mm-hmm.
question, what was the wine pairing, never came about. CEO shows up, the event starts, and then she realized that all the wines that we picked were women-made wines,
Yeah.
women winemakers. It
Wow.
doesn't taste any different from a man's wine. It does not more expensive. Nobody else would have cared. But in that day, in that moment, in that event, for this brand, for these customers, it made the entire difference in the world that we only picked wines made by women.
Mm.
And if you ask me what is the secret recipe, I mean, if I dare to say, listen to your customer. We are
Yeah.
we are suit makers. We're tailors, and we listen and we try to tailor something bespoke. And
Very
I
true.
think chefs have done that in the past, right? When you have your wedding and somebody asks you, "Hey, David, what would you like to eat at your wedding?" They try to learn your personality and they create something bespoke for you. We're not that special. I think the only special thing about us is we take the time to translate that through the five senses.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for this, Ramzi. So, one of the things that we you talked about was the ability to listen. So this is actually a good transition to one of the questions. Let me asking from the audience, and I encourage also the audience to ask more questions for the rest. But we have one question, which is like, how do you? So we talked about B2B customers here, but how do you solicit the feedback from B2C customers, right? And there's another question here, which was, well, actually, given these experiences are very high end and unique, but how do you do to get repeat customers, right? Because obviously, then you have to create many different experiences, which are more costly. So what can you tell about these two aspects? So the first is kind of this feedback mechanism for B2C customers. How do you transform them into advocates, perhaps? And then the second one is really how do you encourage repeat customers, and you push the technology on the one hand to create experiences. How do you make these repeats?
So on the first one, feedback, what's interesting about our business is traditionally people ask you on the way out of the restaurant, how was your experience?
Yeah.
Or at the time you're billing the bill, and that's about it. We do that. We do that because sometimes customers are more comfortable giving feedback live, or it's easier. So we do that. And then on top of that, we solicit you by email to give us feedback the next day. And to me, and there are select customers that come back, and we try to ask them way more pointy questions. Or sometimes we do focus groups. Like in the past month, I've done 5 test dinners for Corsica before we premiered last week. And in these test dinners, you had a full survey on Google Form of asking different questions. And this might be funny for a few people, but what I've learned the most is through looking at customers and not necessarily asking them questions. Because sometimes BDC customers don't find the words to express how they feel, or they don't know how they feel because they didn't know that this was relevant. And sometimes what we do is we do A/B testing in the room at the same time. So we have the immersive space, we have left side, right side. And if you want to test something like different plate, I do the left and the right, and then you study people's reactions in their eyes. You study who took their phone more and took a picture. Well, maybe that was marking more for them. And those are the things we play with every single day. Sometimes you make people wait for something. Sometimes you push people too fast, and you just look at the reaction. And sometimes they're not even aware of the reaction. They're not aware. If you ask somebody, which course marked you the most tonight? They don't know. But or maybe they know one, but they don't know which one. They asked the server the most questions. We know. Well, it was because it was the most unclear one, perhaps, or something like that. So I think you need to spend time observing your customer. That's very important.
I couldn't agree more with this, because observational data, get rid of many of the biases that we have when we prompt people and we ask, questions that induce all kinds of reactions. Maybe let's turn to kind of the limits of technology. So we've talked a lot about this, how you integrate a variety of different technologies. But obviously, you're in a business, hospitality, which is all about relationship and the human experience as well. So how do you maintain that balance between your human and technology? Where do you see the limits? There's a question in the chat actually that it nicely fits this, which is, are there, one of the person is asking what role do you see for augmented or virtual reality in immersive dining? Another way to think about it is, are there technologies or situations we say, no, this is not for me. There's a limit. How do you approach technological investment?
So I use technology for 2 things. One thing is to buy more time, because it's the world's most expensive resource. It's extremely hard. And in a high human touch business, when we spend this much minutes per customer interacting with them, as compared to Microsoft that just ships a laptop and that's it. We spend a lot of time with each customer. We're trying to buy time. So the first use of technology is to get us to buy time. For example, we're one of the extremely few restaurants in Paris where every time you go to the washroom, there's somebody who will check the washroom after you. And that I've done through technology as a way to signal us that somebody has passed through the washroom. And so there, it's just buying us time. When we get automated emails sent or something like that, that's just buying us time. So that's the first aspect of technology. Or for example, we don't say to people we're passing on to the next course we played with lighting in a certain way and we coded it in the experience that the light will go down and the light will go up. And like a theater, you will understand that we're about to change courses and it happens automatically. So we use technology to help us buy time and focus on what matters most, which is the human experience. And then the second way we use technology is to help us create. So to come back to your question about augmented reality or virtual reality, my challenge when I started working on Atica 5 years ago was I still haven't found any convincing technology that allows you to live collective experiences.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I have zero interest in a business of hospitality, which means sharing a table with somebody to create a moment where you, yourself have a beautiful experience. I have zero interest in that. And so when I started working, we looked at Microsoft and Google and different devices they used for AR and VR, and there wasn't a way to get
Mm-hmm.
you to live a moment, share it with somebody, and to see the food in front of you. That triangulation didn't exist, and it still doesn't exist today. So, am I open to using things like that? Absolutely. One could say that we are augmenting reality with the screen because you're actually projecting something that doesn't exist here. We
To some
can play
extent.
on what is the definition of AR. VR, I think, is clear. And also, one thing we haven't touched on is we have two types of content being projected. Camera shot content of realistic things that exist on the planet, and we have a CGI, so computer generated images. And so with that, with AI enabled generated content, we create images that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also amazing because we create universes. And so I want to go back to the question that got in the chat about VR and AR is a diffusion question. Today on the diffusion, I still haven't found something better than projection. Everything device enabled puts you alone in a bubble, and I don't want to do that in a restaurant. And you're trying to eat, so we still need something extremely elegant and beautiful, something like Google, I think, I don't know what's their
Glasses.
name, Google Glass that failed, or something extremely classy that could
Yeah.
get you to see the food and see the person you're sharing
Yeah.
the experience with. We're still not there. And then, and then you have LED projection also. So
Mm-hmm.
LED screens, that's something I haven't used because of the size of the room is so small. 100 square meters is super small that you get overheat and other
Yeah.
the LED failure, the environmental cost of an LED bulb, humans still need 5 to 10 years to figure that one out. So for now, we're projecting on a white wall, and it's the lowest environmental cost, lowest financial cost, most quality that exists today in terms of diffusion. So we're more playing on creation now than diffusion.
Yeah.
Our projection is not that different than your INSEAD classroom one. It's just way better in terms of resolution and such thing. That is just the projected image of.
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, this is great.
And
Thank you
so,
very much.
David, what is the limit? I don't know. I don't know what the world has reserved for us today. We are pushing every single day. If you asked me a few weeks ago, we had only used AI on the food, so in the kitchen side, only to name things, because you tend to use names you've seen. And if you name a menu that is bespoke or a cocktail, sometimes you need inspiration. So you give the AI engine a few different anchor points and you
Yeah.
get it to help you find words. That's amazing. Then we got it to help us on the cocktail side. Well, how do you put INSEAD on a cocktail? And that's an interesting question. And so it can help you get a few starting points. And now we're using it in food,
Yeah.
different food combinations. How do you associate food with different themes, different moments of the year, different emotions? How can it create a dish that can make you feel loved because we're in a wedding? And funnily, AI does know how to make you feel loved. It does know how to execute it. It has a few different sprouts of ideas. But anyway, that's where we're going. I don't know where the limit is. I'm super open to exploring the highest limits of what is possible, and we'll keep doing it every single week.
I think it's just fascinating to hear just your lens and how you approach technology. It's not necessarily like what's the limit, but how do you what's the lens and the sieve through which you see the different technologies and then say I'm willing to try it or I'm not willing to try it.
To,
So let me get back to one of the red thread, which is data. right? So
Yeah.
you are sitting on a ton of data, right? You love observing people. You do A/B test. You have tons of customer data. So data is a big part of how you create value through technology, right? Because data is kind of the key to unlock new learnings about the behaviors, about the customers. So I want to ask you a very simple question. What would you, a few advice for people in the audience? How should they approach data in terms of data storage, but also data capabilities? Do you have, scientists who you hired, who are helping you? Do you outsource? Do you insource? And perhaps, what have you learned in the last few years? Maybe, things were not perfect, but you have learned throughout, these experiences. And what would you recommend to the audience for their data strategy?
Um, if you come from a prehistoric business like I do, which is food, a lot of us don't even have data. So the first thing is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And I started measuring different things, some things that were useful, some things that were completely unuseful. But for example, the way our tasting menu works is you have six different courses or five different, it depends on which experience you take. Let's say it takes 6 course experience. You have six different short movies, six different long movies, and then six dishes, six wines, and so on. What is the right length for each of this? Um, that we started on pressing next every course. When the dining room was done, it presses next, and then the kitchen launches the next course, like a traditional restaurant. And then we got so much data that at some point we put it on autopilot. And then the problem with autopilot is if it says 2 minutes, it's 2 minutes. And even if you drop the sauce, then people will anticipate having a course and they have nothing. And so now we're at the point where we have enough data to create the autopilot, and then we have the capacity to branch out and then to add time, like we spoke about earlier. So I think for the audience, first thing is measure it. Second thing, measure more than you need. I have so many columns that I don't need, and we'll just have them there. And then the next thing is sometimes I force myself to put two things together and say, what does it mean for us? Is there a correlation between such things?
Mm.
Is there a correlation between the rate of no-show and when you book your reservation? It's something that is just business. It's not had nothing to do with creating a better customer experience. But it's like when people tend to reserve last minute, do they tend to have more no-shows? And so I think what I would advise people is try to ask when you look at try to force correlations and see, okay, is there something
Yeah.
there? You need to dig. And so we do everything in-house for now. We still have nowhere as much data as I would like us to have, but we still have some data. I'll give you another example. Last week, I had a creative meeting with a company. We're creating an experience for them, a luxury brand, and they wanted the color black and the color blue. And so the color blue is like, how is blue naturally available in nature? It's only 5 or 6 ingredients that are blue. On black, you have about 10, 15. That's it. And so your color palette's quite limited. And so for a customer to feel safe, they're super scared. They're a black brand. They've never done black food. So they're scared. So I use data to reassure them. It's like, guys, this is the 15 black ingredients. You want a consensual menu that everybody accepts. Well, here's some data that you can find online on which ingredients perform better with different audiences. And so to me, David, people tend to think that there's no data in the world. There's a lot of data. You just need to ask the right questions. And how do you ask the right questions? Well, you ask a few questions and then you'll figure out which ones are right. But my first advice with people is ask the question. If you don't know,
Yeah.
ask Google, ask OpenAI, ask anybody, and try to see, is there data out there to
Yeah.
say, for black, should I use charcoal or should I use squid ink? Which one is more commonly acceptable by human beings?
Oh, thank you for this, Ramzi. And I particularly relate to this kind of, I always say data strategies has two legs, the correlation and the causation, right? And I think you've experienced firsthand like how, moving from one to the other is tricky, requires different methodologies, but you're doing this quite well. Let me ask, we've talked a lot about the technology from the kitchen side and from what you're trying to do on creation. And actually, there was a question from someone who presumably also went to the restaurant because he was aware of the change of policy. When you design such amazing experiences, what people do, well, I don't have my phone here, but they take pictures. They want to share with others. We know that originally when you created this experience, you had a socket for people, say, like no technology.
Yeah.
We want it to be very immersive. We want it to be very unique. Technology has no place. But you changed that policy. And so the question is kind of why and what change did you perhaps observed in customer behavior?
So the challenge, David, when you start doing multimodal experiences, multisensory experiences, is the size of the RAM disk of your brain doesn't augment. Your brain is still 512 gigabytes, that's it. So the more you start bombarding it with senses, the more less RAM space you have in your brain to understand. And so what I tried to do when I banned the phones when we opened in September, to putting them in locked pouches, is create more disk space in your brain. I wanted to remove the phone so that we have more time to be present in the moment together. It worked beautifully. People had a great time, like Rafael, who I just saw in the questions that asked the question. And the challenge that we have is people wanted to call the babysitter and make sure their kids are okay. So there was a limit to the exercise, and I didn't do it to be less technology. It was only to liberate more disk space in your attention span. And so now, to my beautiful surprise, and I'm quite optimistic about this, phones are allowed at the restaurant, and people take a couple of photos, but they don't spend their evening on the phone.
Mm.
And what still protects us is because we're 6 meters on the ground in an old cinema space, there's no reception. And we tend not to give the Wi-Fi unless somebody really, really asks. And so you don't know that you don't have internet. You just don't have notifications anymore. And that alone, cutting you out from the world, helps. And so that's what we're playing with.
Yeah.
But I think the problem with phones is you're not present. So we try to take them away from the dining rooms.
Of course, no, it's a double-edged sword, right? And thank you for this, absolutely. There's actually a question now. We're only have 8 minutes left, and so if you have any questions, feel free to add. One question here from I can't remember Raphael again. Was asking, bringing to our attention this technology called the Petit Chef. Are you aware of this?
Yeah, yeah.
So the
Le
idea
Petit
is,
Chef,
yeah. Oh, you want to
they
explain and then
project
go
on
for it?
tables. So
Yes,
I know them
rather
very
than
well.
projecting on wall, project on. What do you think out of it, and have you thought about integrating it?
So in Le Petit Chef, you have small projectors that shoot down the table and they
Yeah.
color your table with images. My challenge with that is the neck of the angle of your neck. So you're looking down and you're not seeing the person in front of you, which to me defines defeats the purpose of hospitality. And to me, I don't want to compete with the food. This is about the food. We're a serious restaurant, and I come from a traditional family, so we're not allowed to even play with our phones on the table. So to me, the table is set for food. That's it. And we try to play on the screens. And this way, when you see the image, you can still see the person in front of you and still have a collective moment with them. I just don't want to put you in a capsule where on your own. So, and I think this is 112 square meters of different images. The table is about 3 square meters. So I think I can give you way more for your eyes on the screen than on the table. Will we play on different things? Yes, we do things on the table, but they're analog, not digital. I prefer to keep the table real, and that's my way to play on the digital and the analog aspects.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much for this. And we've well understood that you're very open and you try to play around with every kind of new piece of technology and see works and what works less. Maybe as we are getting closer, we want to open beyond the world of hospitality. And so out of everything that you have learned, that you have experienced, where do you think, what other industries do you think these technologies are most applicable to? Where do you think there's an opportunity to leverage the same technology, the same approach, and create a difference?
To me, our sister industry in hospitality is communication. People think hospitality is about eating. Today, people don't go. I had Alain Ducasse at the restaurant in February, and he said, "We don't come to such restaurants to eat. We come to live a moment." And so when you start speaking like that, you make me think of the industry of communication. So I think our closest industry today is
Mm.
marketing communication, be it written, visual. And I think brands and different people in the industry should start playing with tech. Everybody wants to be out of the box, but everyone hires the same consultants. They do the same publicities, the same things. And I think if you want to be out of the box, you need to be radically different in incorporating some technology to bring some fresh perspective that not only an external consultant can bring, but sometimes a machine can bring to the table. And it doesn't mean that it's going to reinvent your brand. We'll just give you a few ideas that can help you go in a certain direction you haven't been to try to make your message more clear to people, because that's what
Yeah.
communication is about, sending clear messages. So I think communication is an industry that, and then the other one that I'm starting to play on is learning. Today, um, people like you have a problem of having their students remember messages. So I'm playing on immersive learning at Atica to say, how can we create moments where it sticks better to your brain? And in a learning standpoint, we want that to spend a lifetime in your brain because we're trying to teach you something. And how do you use technology to enable that? And I know INSEAD is playing. I have a professor called Itai Stern who taught me, who was playing on different VR technologies to get you to remember a case more. So
You're right. No, absolutely. And thinking about immersion is not only something about that hospitality or communication, but it's also something that we think a lot about in education. Maybe let's go back to hospitality. So, what is the one thing in hospitality broadly that you think people are not spending enough time on?
in hospitality,
Yes.
business, making sure hospitality has become so crazy lately, that chefs are superstars on Instagram and on Top Chef and TV and so on, that everybody thinks it's an art project, and people have forgotten that for business, for a project to be sustainable in the long term, it needs to be a profit-making business. And so a lot of chefs imagine these crazy experiences without ever thinking about, can I be profitable? Can this be sustainable on its own in the long term? I think that would be my best advice: is send everybody to business school and let them learn a few things about how to read a P&L and how do you make sure there's enough gas in the machine to keep going.
And so that's thank you so much for this, Ramzi. And so this is a perfect segue to the last question, which Ashika is asking, which is will nicely tie together our conversation. As an INSEAD MBA graduate, how did your business education change your innovation? What are some of the things that you think you did maybe a bit better, a bit differently than if you hadn't gone through INSEAD?
I think it helped me ask the right questions. It didn't help me get much answers, that's for sure, but it did help me ask the right questions. For example, I track something like staff to customer ratio. That to me is the most important predictor of EBITDA of a restaurant, gastronomic high-end restaurant in the world. And no chef ever thought about that. But because you went to business school, you think of things like ratios and you start to find, okay, well, which one has the most weight out of all these KPIs on predicting the performance of a restaurant? And so that's what I think it helped me, is asking questions such as that, such as scalability, such as CapEx per dollar of OpEx. What is that ratio? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Chef Ramzi. It was a pleasure to have you. This concludes our
Thank you,
conversation.
David.
Everyone in the audience, I hope you enjoyed our conversation. I know some have already booked Atica. If not, I can only encourage to go and taste or have a taste of this experience place. And thank you once again for this great conversation. Bye bye.
Thank you, everyone.